Hello everybody, it's Shady here, and today I'm going to be doing another collection video. And it's going to be my Sega Saturn collection. A relatively small collection, but yeah, it's a really cool one anyway. Obviously, basically the Sega Saturn has always been kind of my holy grail system to collect for. And yeah, last year basically I started my collection, so I finally picked one up, got the console at a good price. Because I'm sure people know this, but yeah, Sega Saturn is notoriously insanely expensive to collect for. So yeah, I managed to get the system cheap, which typically you can. I think I got it for just under 100, and I've got a few games. Obviously, we're going to go over the collection. I'll explain some things when it comes to pricing and tips and stuff. But yeah, before all that, I kind of want to go over a bit of a history lesson because yeah, I'm a huge Sega fan. Like I think a lot of old school gamers are. And yeah, obviously, I think it's important because I just love the history of Sega and the Sega Saturn in particular. Obviously, as we know, Sega are now just a third party publisher, but they did make consoles back in the day. So obviously they started off with arcade systems, and then essentially those systems, it was like the Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, they essentially converted that into a home console, which was called the Master System. Which was kind of, a moderate success, but they really hit it off with the Mega Drive, or Genesis, as everyone else calls it. I think it was called Genesis in the States, and it was Mega Drive everywhere else. And one thing that a lot of people probably don't know, a lot of people stateside anyway, was the Mega Drive was huge in Europe. Obviously, I'm from England, the UK. And yeah, the Mega Drive was basically what the Super Nintendo was in North America, pretty much. It was the system, the biggest one, the one that everyone had. When I was a kid, my parents weren't really gamers, but they just got one for some reason. I guess because it was, they had a bunch of kids, so they just thought, let's get them a gaming console. So yeah, we had that. And what was cool about it is it had Sonic built in, which was insane. Like, the best game was just inbuilt into the system, one of the coolest things ever. That happened a little bit later because I think originally it was Altered Beast and then it became Sonic. But anyway, obviously the Mega Drive was a huge success, but Sega really struggled to follow it up. They did all sorts of weird stuff. So first they obviously they released a CD add-on, which was kind of a standard thing. A few other systems did it. It was at the time sort of that early 90s, sort of late 80s, where CD technology kind of started hitting off, and they created the Mega CD, or Sega CD, which was like a little add-on that just basically allowed you to have CD quality audio and like bigger games. Sonic CD being kind of exemplifying what that was. So that was a pretty standard thing, because obviously like the TurboGrafx also did that as well, didn't it, where it had a CD add-on. It was kind of a standard thing. And then they released the 32X, which is kind of insane. It was basically the first Pro system, like the PS5 Pro, Xbox One X, all that sort of stuff. Sega basically did it first. But obviously it wasn't a separate system. It was an attachment that you put on the top of the Mega Drive, and had to have its own separate power supply, and basically like double the graphics power of it. So 32, as in 32-bit as opposed to 16-bit processing. So really cool idea, but obviously it didn't really hit off because who wants to buy all this extra stuff? There was also rumors that they were going to do, I think it was called the Neptune, which I think it was a prototype. It actually was in prototype stage. It was basically just the 32X as a separate system, what it really should have been, really. And then obviously they followed that up with the Sega Saturn, which is what we're going to talk about now. And obviously this was the main competitor to the PlayStation. And there was kind of like this insane thing where basically it was like E3, and then basically I think Sega was saying that they would be shocked if Sony released a console at like under £300, because I think the Sega Saturn was, I think, $399, and then the head of Sony at the time of PlayStation went up to the stage at E3 after Sega's announcement and basically just said $299. So they just sold it for £100 cheaper. Which, basically because Sony were new to the business and they were quite a big company anyway, outside of gaming, they were able to like just sell out at a ridiculous cost. This is kind of where that trend started of selling hardware at a loss and then making up with software. yeah, Sony kind of started that model. And then, yeah, basically, Sega panicked, so they ended up releasing the system like 6 months early, which pissed off all the developers who basically, didn't have games ready, and then they had to release certain games early which weren't quite complete, and then they had to like release revised versions of those later on, which were updated with certain games. And yeah, it was just obviously that's the console that kind of led to Sega's downfall, because that bombed massively. They quickly rushed out the Dreamcast, which was amazing, just like all the Sega consoles. But unfortunately, at that time, Sega just bled so much money and they couldn't continue in the console market, unfortunately. But the Sega Saturn, despite being a failure, not being in the market for very long, it's kind of become like this cult classic system that everyone loves because of its failures. And, basically, there's one thing where basically Sega just got rid of everything Saturn-wise. So a lot of these games are kind of trapped on the Saturn. And the Saturn also had very unique ports of games because it did things very differently to the PlayStation. Essentially, from what I know, the Saturn was basically a 2D powerhouse. So obviously, it had a lot of great arcade conversions of games, tons of like SNK and like Capcom arcade games. A lot of the fighting games had better versions on the Dreamcast the Saturn, sorry, compared to the PlayStation. So yeah, it's kind of become this thing where you got the better versions of like fighting games. You had all of Sega's awesome games. And you had interesting ports like the Resident Evil port and stuff, which looked very different because pixels, I think, were done more rectangular than triangular, or were done more triangular than rectangular or something. So they looked very different to the PlayStation in that regard. But yeah, it's an awesome system. Now let's actually get to the collection. Yeah, so I don't have very many games. But yeah, first of all, I'm going to show my like European versions of games. First of all, we have one of my favorites, Street Fighter Alpha 2. This is an incredible game. Any fans of Happy Console Gamer will know that him and Rodman absolutely love this game. Yeah, and obviously, like I said, this is the better version. This is very strange, this game. So, obviously, it was released on PlayStation, Saturn, arcades, obviously. And randomly, this also had a Super Nintendo port, which is actually kind of good, apparently. I've never played that version. Obviously, I mainly played the PS1 version. I'm actually more familiar with Alpha 3. That was the one I really played. Obviously, the Alpha series, or Zero in Japan, is a prequel series. So that's why you have Akuma as the main villain, and you've got like a younger looking Ryu. I called him Ryan, bloody hell, Ryu. It's awesome. Or Ryu, sorry. Obviously 1 and 2 players. Another great thing about the Saturn is it had an amazing pad, basically a fight pad, D-pad and 6 buttons. It was basically tailor-made for all fighting games. So yeah, it's an amazing fighting game system. Next up, we've got Virtua Fighter 2. This was one of those where, like I said, there was kind of a rushed early version, and then there was an updated version later. And then obviously this version of Virtua Fighter is near enough arcade perfect as well. As people know, there was like Sega ported their games to everything. So there's like a really cool Mega Drive version of this where it's kind of 2D based, not pixel based. But yeah, obviously this is one of the kind of early proper 3D fighters. Yeah, I love the Virtua Fighter series. I think we've got a new one coming up soon, haven't we? Because Sega are reviving all these old franchises. So yeah, just a really awesome fighting game. Can't go wrong with that. Next up, there's another one. This is Fighting Vipers, another Sega exclusive one. I think this takes fighters from a bunch of different games of Sega's. And I believe this is the one where you can unlock the car from Daytona as one of the characters. So yeah, very interesting game. I think it was like Classic Game Room doing a review on this. And yeah, obviously I had to pick it up. These are some of the like cheap Saturn games, basically. That's why I've got a lot of these. These are like your bread and butter ones. We've got another one, Destruction Derby, which is kind of like a racing game, but you crash into each other. I can't remember what you call that, that sort of thing. Destruction Derby, I guess, is what you call it, but yeah. Those are kind of like your bread and butter, like pretty cheap games. These will cost you like under 20 quid, roughly. You shouldn't pay anything more than that. That's just like, that's small fry on the Saturn. But obviously, the thing you really want to do with the Saturn, and one of the interesting things, obviously, the Saturn, even though it was kind of a failure, it actually was insanely popular in Japan. it actually outperformed both the PlayStation and the N64 in Japan, if I'm correct. Definitely the N64. I'm not too sure on the PlayStation, but it rivaled it anyway. Yeah, it had support for so long. It was the same with the Dreamcast as well. They loved it in Japan because obviously it did these arcade games so great. So, one of the main things you want to do when you get a Saturn is importing. And one of the great things about the Saturn is it's so bloody easy to do it. You don't need to have like a modded system. You don't need to buy a Japanese system, and you can if you want. But basically, the Saturn had a space for a RAM card, basically 4 MB RAM to expand the RAM. Obviously, I just said RAM like 20 times. And yeah, basically, there's these things you can get. These are kind of like aftermarket things. They may have done them at the time as well, but you basically get these like 4-in-1 things. Essentially, this slot was used for a RAM cart and also a save game thing. And then you get these things that do RAM cart saves. I think it allows for like cheat code things, Game Shark type thing. And then there's also basically it prevents or unlocks the regions. And yeah, you can get these quite easy. It's just thing you slot in there. It's called like, I can't remember, like Action Replay 4-in-1 or something like that. So it allows you to do all those functions, like, because basically the Saturn had internal memory, but obviously you want a separate memory card and you just slot it in the back. There you get this 4-in-1 thing. You can play games from all regions, and you basically save a shitload of money when you do that. And there's a bunch of games that were only in Japan as well that you can get. Yeah, we've got some of them here. So first one, this is Puyo Puyo's son. Obviously, if you guys don't know, Puyo Puyo was basically kind of like, you basically have these 4 beans. You can see the picture there. You get these little beans, 4 different colors. You have to match them up in a row up to 4, and then they disappear. And it's kind of like a versus thing, so you fight each other. We got Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine on the Sega Saturn, which was basically just a palette swap of Puyo Puyo. And essentially it was exclusive to Japan until Puyo Puyo Fever on the PS2, original Xbox, and GameCube. But yeah, this is Puyo Puyo's son. This was basically ported to everything. I even have a Game Boy Color version of this as well. And there was like a PlayStation and an N64 version as well. Great game. What's really cool about this is it has like a proper story mode and you have all these different characters. I think the main girl is called like Amethy, and there's like, I think the devil or someone is like in love with her and he's like the main villain. It's a very like strange story, but really cool. Next up, obviously more fighting games. One thing I was talking about was all these awesome like arcade conversions. So yeah, we've got the King of Fighters 95, one of my absolute favorites. I love the King of Fighters. Obviously SNK, as people know, you know, they had their Neo Geo hardware, MVS and AES and the Neo Geo CD. Essentially the MVS was this really interesting thing. It was essentially an arcade system that allowed you to switch cartridges. So you can get one system. You didn't have to buy a whole system to be able to, you know, per game. They designed it so you can just swap them out, and it was designed to be much more convenient for arcade, you know, arcade kind of people, whatever you call them, arcade places, or just arcades, I guess is what you call them, really. I don't know why I'm so confused with that. But then obviously they created the AES, which was the home console version, which was insanely expensive, and they created the Neo Geo CD, which was meant to be like a cut price version of that. And the games were designed around that specific system. All of them pretty much worked on that. You had King of Fighters 94 all the way up to like 2003, supporting this one system, or you know, set of hardware. Obviously, pretty much 2D based. But obviously, SNK also ported their games as well because they knew, you know, not everyone was going to buy that system. So obviously, they've been porting the games pretty much since like Super Nintendo and Mega Drive, sorry. So yeah, obviously they bought a bunch of those games to the Saturn, and these are some pretty good conversions. Yeah, so King of Fighters 95, this was the second King of Fighters game. 94 was the first. Obviously, I'm sure everyone knows this, but SNK did loads of different fighting games, Art Fighting, Samurai Showdown, bloody Fatal Fury, which we're getting a new one of soon, City of Walls. I think it's coming out in a couple months, cannot bloody wait. And yeah, just basically put all the fighters together. 94, well, one thing I have to explain. Usually you have teams of 3 in these games, and you do 3-on-3. You can also, you know, they also give you the choice of 1-on-1. In 94, you only could choose specific teams. of 3. And typically when you look at the character select screen, you will see them in blocks of 3 because those are the like official teams. But 95 actually allowed you to select any characters and create any combination of 3 you wanted to. So that's why this is the one I typically go back to. Yeah, very solid. But yeah, one annoying thing about this, one thing that I did not realize is I thought, because basically a lot of the fighting games and a certain amount of games utilize the RAM cart, and a lot of them would just do it so it would improve animations and stuff like that, and you didn't necessarily need it. But this one, you need the RAM cart. But not only that, you need a specific RAM cart for the King of Fighters 95 that has actual data on it, which the game uses. So obviously I popped this in, I was like, why the hell is it not working? And then I realized you need that specific RAM cart, so I'm gonna have to pick that up at some point. Yeah, or I could just buy another version of the game. Obviously, you could just buy it on like PlayStation 5 or something, I think. I'm sure it's available. Yeah, and then we have King of Fighters 97. Obviously, yeah, just an increased roster. Very solid. You've got my boy Ayori there. Yeah, King of Fighters is just awesome. Yeah, and what I love is they made these games just look even better and better, even though they were using the same hardware. And then we've got 2 more, my last 2, which are kind of like the main ones I wanted to get. First of all, we've got Metal Slug, another SNK game. This is kind of like a run and gun shooter where you can do up to 2 players. Yeah, this was quite expensive. I think this was also, I want to say this was Japanese exclusive, but I don't. Maybe it was also released here. But yeah, typically this is going to cost you well over 100 for like the copy over here. I managed to get a decent price for it. Yeah, I got it for like under 70, I think, which is still a lot, to be fair. Yeah, I love Metal Slug, so I don't mind. I'm going to suggest, unless you're a die-hard fan, you don't necessarily need to get this, because this isn't necessarily arcade perfect. It does have like sections to slow down and stuff, but it's just a really cool, interesting port that I had to have. You can literally just, if you want to, you can probably just buy any of the SNK collections, or just buy any of the Metal Slug games on any of the digital stores for like a couple of quid. So you don't need to do this. I think there's one of the best ones, if you're interested in SNK stuff, on the Nintendo Wii, there is, it was also released for the PS2 and I think like the PSP, but there was like an SNK Classics Collection Volume 1 that has a bunch of King of Fighters and some Metal Slug games on there. The PS2 one has kind of gone up in price, but you can typically find the Nintendo Wii version for like 20-ish quid. So yeah, that might be the way you want to go. Or you just emulate them, I guess. But it's really up to you. But last but not least, one I had to get, that's Panzer Dragoon Saga. Yeah, if anyone knows anything about the Saturn, this is basically the most expensive game of the Saturn if you want the North American version. Essentially, Panzer Dragoon is like, essentially it's a, like, pretty much like a rail shooter, but you're flying on a dragon, and it also plays like a kind of vehicular combat kind of game where you're flying, you know, like an Ace Combat kind of game. And then basically they made 2 games for the Saturn, and then the third one, which was basically Panzer Dragoon RPG, is what it's called here, but we called it Panzer Dragoon Saga, so you can see me in the reflection there. Yeah, essentially this version is like a fraction of the price, the Japanese version, and yeah, obviously, you know, I can just use a guide, pretty much. That's what I'm going to do when I do get around to playing this game. Instead of buying that version, I'm just going to play this one. It's just like have a translation guide handy so I know what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm sure there's even like story breakdowns and everything, so yeah. But that's my Saturn collection. Also, I've got a little bit of a bonus of a really tiny collection I've got that I'm starting. But before that, I want to kind of explain a few things with the Saturn. Like I said, with the Saturn, definitely if you're going to collect, go for the Japanese games. That is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Plus, I just think they look better because they're in these proper jewel cases as opposed to the rubbish ones that our ones were in. Another thing, there's this really interesting thing you could do. It's called, oh my god, what is it called? Like, there's essentially this mod thing you can do where you can get another, again, like the RAM cart thing. It's the thing you put in there, and it will basically allow you to play ripped games pretty much if you're interested. So that's another way you can get around having to do that. There's also mods where you can obviously, you know, run games off SD cards and stuff. A lot of consoles do this now. Where you essentially, you replace the optical drive with a SD card slot, and that's another way you can just, you know, put ROMs on there, but still play them on original hardware. So those are some, you know, tips there for you. if you're interested. Another thing with the Saturn, obviously for us over here, our controller wasn't very good compared to the one in Japan and North America. There was a Model 1 controller which was kind of a bit bulky and the D-pad wasn't as great. And then they did like a revision to that, but we never got it over here, unfortunately. Yeah, so you might want to look into that. Also, what's great, obviously, about the Saturn is this is, like I said, it's kind of like this console that's kind of like very popular now in the retro gaming scene. Having a Saturn collection is kind of, you know, something a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a clout chasey kind of thing, but it's kind of like a kind of thing you can brag about as a collector. So because of that, there's been a lot of like, you know, stuff made, accessories and stuff like that made. So you can literally buy wireless controllers, brand new ones. I actually bought one off Amazon. And there's two variations of this you can get. Yeah, so there's basically it's the Japanese style 6-button controller that you can get, which basically, you know, you can use wirelessly, which you can use with the original Saturn, or with your PC, or with like a Switch, even a PS3, which is great because you can just use it as 5 controller pad. And then there's one that adds 2 analog sticks as well, so you can use it as more of a modern controller if you prefer. Yeah, and then you can also get wired controllers, brand new wired controllers. I think Retrobit did once as well. They were meant to do Dreamcast ones, but that never happened, unfortunately. But I'm pretty sure they did the Saturn one, so yeah, pretty readily available. Also, you do get like little HDMI converters and things like that if you're interested. But I'm going to suggest playing on a CRT TV, really. That's always the best bet when it comes to these consoles. But yeah, obviously, that's pretty much everything with the Saturn. I'm going to show you, I've got a couple of games here that are kind of interesting. So basically, I've kind of started a TurboGrafx CD or PC Engine collection. So I've got a couple of games. I don't even have the console yet, but I've got a couple of games. So first of all, we've got Super Darius, which is like, yeah, obviously, you know, this is the side-scrolling shmup. And yeah, I just love it. It's got a seal on it, but I don't think it's actually sealed. I think they just put that over it. So I don't think this is actually brand new. But yeah, basically, yeah, this is a CD game. And yeah, something I just had to get because it's just a very cool thing. They also had a version of Street Fighter 2, which is a cool version of it. Another thing with the NEC, this was basically a competitor to the original Nintendo. So it's actually an 8-bit system. And yeah, it used these things, Hue cards or Q cards. I used to say Q cards, but I think it's actually Hue cards. But yeah, it's on a little card. And apparently it's a really good version. So when I do finally get around to getting one, I know Analog did their version of it. I think it's called the Analog Duo, which basically it's all in one. Where you get, yeah, because it's very weird with because when you're looking into the hardware, it's so confusing. So I'll probably just get that at some point. But yeah, that's just a couple of games I got, you know, starting that collection. Yeah, I've heard that's a really cool system to collect for. So yeah, obviously, you know, I'm the kind of person who likes to have small, like little curated collections of different systems. So yeah, that's what I'm looking to get. I'm also looking at Neo Geo CD. That's probably the next one I need to get. I've actually got a couple of games already for it. They haven't arrived yet. But yeah, obviously King of Fighters 95, obviously, and Fatal Fury 3 special, I think it was. So yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to get one of those at some point. Yeah, I'm not in a rush to get the system, but I saw a couple of the games really cheap, so I thought, oh, I'll just snap them up, you know. But yeah, anyway, that's everything. That's everything for this video. If you watched this video, thanks as always. Like, subscribe, all that YouTube channels if you'd like to, and I'll catch you in the next one. We will do something else gaming related. Anyway, have a great rest of your day.